Let's look at how exactly to use an affirmation. This is just a suggestion. There's actually many ways of doing it. And we will start with one or two general affirmations, verbal affirmations, and maybe practice that together. And after that we may look at some more specific things concerning those areas that tend to be problematic for many people, and those areas are usually either money, physical health, and relationships. Those are perhaps the most challenging areas in most people's lives. One of those may be particularly challenging for you. There's another area that one could add, and that is the desire to be engaged in making a meaningful contribution to the world, the search for meaning, and so that something that you consider truly worthwhile, so to want to make a difference in this world through your activity. That is a desire that people have, and that is a desire that is not necessarily an ego desire. It comes from a deeper place where you realize that you actually can make a difference. You know there is a power within you, and that power just needs to be released, externalized. You need to find a way of accessing the power that is within you and bring it into this world in whatever form. So now, a very important thing, however, yes, you need to deal with those things, and you do your best in your life to improve your life, to make it work more smoothly, to become more empowered, to make a contribution either in the form of a service that you give, or a product that you make, something that adds good to the world. So that's something you may already have found something, but you may look for more empowerment to what you have found. You may want to expand and see if you can reach more people through whatever it is you make, if it's a product, or something you provide, if it's a service. Or it may be that you don't know yet what your calling is, and of course there are still many people who are looking for their ultimate life purpose. Having said all that, it's important to realize, although yes, you need to deal with these things, you do your best, the best you can, to create harmonious relationships, to create a certain flow of abundance in your life, to see if you can stay as healthy as possible. All these things you need to, yes, take responsibility for and do the best you can. It's important. But don't look to it as the ultimate source of satisfaction in your life. In fact, you need to find the ultimate source of satisfaction first. And that is here and now, and you don't need an affirmation for that, although pointers can be useful. There are certain statements that you can make that they are pointers or signposts, and sometimes signposts are helpful as long as you don't confuse the signpost with the destination or what it points to. So the ultimate source of satisfaction in life is to recognize yourself as consciousness, as presence. And if you miss that, which I call sometimes the transcendent dimension, then no matter what you achieve in life, it's not going to make you happy, not for long. And there's always, every situation is fragile. Every situation is impermanent. Every person, if you look to a person to provide some ultimate satisfaction, to make you happy, it's not going to work. That's so be careful with misinterpreting what a relationship can do for you. It's a wonderful thing to have a harmonious relationship with another human being or with other human beings, and of course it's part of the awakened way. The conscious relationships means they become more harmonious, but the conscious relationship can only arise if you don't look to the relationship as the source of ultimate satisfaction in your life. Because if you do, every person in your life is eventually going to disappoint you, let you down. Because people are not just, they're not a single entity. A human being consists of many energy formations that have come together. You can call them subpersonalities and so on. You're not relating to a single person. A single person consists of different subpersonalities, and some of them may not be very conscious. So ultimately, if you look to a person as the ultimate solution to your feeling of insufficiency, then you will be disappointed. But if you look into your feeling of insufficiency or not enough or something lacking, which is the most common thing, fear is part of that also. If you look at that directly and see what is that, how does it arise, and then see if you might discover that it's created, a lot of it is created by unconscious mind activity, and it may be your pain body also, your pain body that is periodically in a state of suffering. It needs and wants to suffer. The addiction to suffering. The transcendent dimension frees you from dependency on external things, but also it can empower your ability, it will empower your ability to create in the external without being dependent on the creation, without identifying with the creation, without using it in the service of yourself and derive an enhanced sense of self from what you create. So let's begin with acknowledging in ourselves the transcendent dimension, because it's always here and now. You don't need time to get there. The transcendent dimension is in you here and now, what the Buddha calls emptiness, but would be better translated as spaciousness, what Jesus calls the kingdom of heaven, which would be better translated as the dimension of spaciousness. That's how I translate it. Where is that spaciousness that they talk about? You have to come to a cessation in the stream of thinking, now, right now. And you no longer know who you are right now. You don't know who you are. And you don't need to know who you are right now. And when you become comfortable with not knowing who you are or actually knowing anything anymore, because you're no longer thinking, but you're awake, what remains is your essential self or beingness, which is consciousness. And that is, knowing yourself as that is the ultimate source of satisfaction in life. And you can know yourself as that even if everything else has failed in your external life. And with that comes also a deep peace, but not a dead peace, an alive peace. You feel that is the peace that passes all understanding, Jesus called it. In other words, it's not derived from any circumstance or event in your external life. So it is, in a way, it is a way of self-denial. That's why Jesus said, deny thyself, which means recognize that ultimately it's not real and stay with what is real, which is your presence, or the presence, which is consciousness. That is the primordial, ultimately only true spiritual practice, and after a while it's no longer a spiritual practice, it becomes your natural way of being, to feel yourself not only to be a person, but more fundamentally a spacious field of presence, consciousness. So in other words, you are conscious that you are conscious. You're aware that you are aware. You know that you're aware. That's the only thing that you know. And it's not only that you know in that moment, in this moment. You know that you're aware, even that's not quite right. The awareness knows itself, and that's you. And if you go to that place, that is a transcendent dimension, and you need a high degree of alertness to sustain that in normal everyday life. It won't be as intense as it is perhaps at this moment, but it can be in the background. And then you start to speak and deal with things, and yet there is an alertness in the background, and you can sense that continuously. Then you deal with the rest of your life, and then you do your affirmations if you choose to do that. Not everybody may want to do it. Not everybody needs to do it. You could do a manifestation technique. Let's do a general one, but start always with going to the transcendent dimension and sense yourself as the presence. If you then choose to do so, you say, for example, to have a very general affirmation, my life is filled with creativeness and achievement and prosperity. Now, nobody can object with that. It's not an objectionable statement, but can you sense that this is a reality? Now, here's where what in traditional is called faith comes in. And this happens very easily. What you bring together is that sense of intense, alert presence and the words that you have uttered. My life is filled with creativeness and achievement and prosperity. And you can sense the power of your presence, and the power of your presence merges with the words. So the space after the words is important. My life is filled with creativeness and achievement and prosperity. And then you sense the power of your presence, which is the source of the creativeness and achievement and prosperity. So in an undifferentiated state, the achievement, prosperity, achievement already there in the undifferentiated beingness or presence. Creativeness comes from there, achievement comes from there, prosperity, true prosperity, is the feeling of prosperity. True prosperity is not countless things, but it could become manifested as things coming to you. But true prosperity is to feel prosperity. And what is that? To feel the abundance of life. Again, it is contained in an undifferentiated way in the sense of presence. The sense of presence is not yet differentiated, the source of abundance. So this means to have faith, to actually believe that the words that you are speaking are true. This is how you do it. You need, at the same time, you need to feel the presence, which is the transcendent dimension. Everything comes out of the transcendent dimension. So it is, my life is filled with creativeness and achievement and prosperity. Now this, if you have a session, for example, where you, let's say you spend 10 minutes, up to 15 minutes, don't overdo it. Let's say you set aside a 15-minute session and you focus on one or two statements. For example, these general ones, my life is filled with creativeness and achievement and prosperity. You could add a little one, but you need to understand what it means. I am filled with power. This is not egoic power, power over others. It's the creative power of the universe, which again is in the undifferentiated state of pure consciousness. That is power. That's the power of now. My life is filled with power. My life is filled with creativeness and achievement and prosperity. It actually You bring together the words and the feeling of the presence, which is the reality behind the words, and that means faith. Now, this is actually for you is actually already a reality, because it is. On the unseen, it's a reality. In that dimension of the unseen, it's already a reality. So this is how you actually, it's so enjoyable to do this practice when the creativeness and the achievement and prosperity actually manifests externally in your life. You will feel no different from the way you will feel when you make that statement. It's totally the same. You won't feel better or more complete. You might feel pleasantly pleased about it. You say, oh, that's great. You might feel a kind of happiness when it happens, but on a deeper level, deeper than the feeling of happiness, there's already you already here and now. There is that deep sense of connectedness with the power, and that won't change. So then another way, how often do you say it? That's another point. You can make that statement in a totally unforced way. Remember, there's no willpower, you're just stating a fact, and you can feel the reality that's behind it. And so you could use it in one session 15 times, just a suggestion, 10, 15, more than that is unnecessary. My life is filled with creativeness and achievement and prosperity. 10 times, or less. And you have little pauses before you say it again. Speaking out aloud may be even more helpful than just thinking it. And continuously feel that presence. It helps to, before you start a session, any session, go into the inner body, feel the aliveness within, and that is the entry point into presence. And then you continuously sense the entire body and the aliveness in it, and the presence that is underneath it all, that presence, but the presence that is everywhere, but initially it's experienced as within you. So it's a lovely statement. My life is created with achievement, whatever it was, I've forgotten already. And then the words disappear, and then what's left is the feeling of it. And that's a successful session. Another way you can write it out 10 times, and while you write it, you speak it. You can do that with any affirmation. So the words are creative force. It's using your mind as a tool for creation. The words create the reality behind it in the moment of speaking. Now this is a very general one. So if you write, my life is filled with creativeness and achievement and prosperity. I am filled with power. This is a very pleasant meditation. And even if you didn't do anything, it would be a very pleasant meditation. And so you can then have a more specific affirmation too, concerning, for example, your financial situation. You can make statements about abundance, that there's a flow of abundance in my life. I feel wealthy. I'm becoming wealthy. Now, make sure that you don't have some negative ideas in your mind about money, that there's something wrong with it. So there are many people who are continuously suffering from shortage of money and they think money is bad. Of course, money can be used in the service of the ego. But the important thing is to generate the feeling of abundance even while you have no money externally. In my own life, just to give an example, for many years I lived with very little money, often not knowing what I would live on next week, the following week, sometimes even the next day. And even when I was writing, I was already doing spiritual teaching, not writing a book yet. Again, there was just enough to survive. I never felt poor. When I was surprised when I read in some publication at the time what the poverty level is, what is considered the poverty level in people's income. And I realized, I'm well below the poverty level. It's strange that I don't feel poor, because in the external, I appreciated the little things of life, the objects, flowers, plants, appreciation even of a glass of water. I was sometimes surprised. I remember there was so little money. I went out, with a group of people. I was still in England. We went to a nice self-service restaurant, good quality food, and these people, a young couple I just met, I was looking at the price and say, can I afford this? And say, okay, no, maybe not. And I took one dish. And this couple, they didn't even look at the price. They just put everything on all the desserts and put everything, their trays were full of stuff. And I said, wow, how can anybody have so much money that they can fill their tray with? By the way, later they got arrested for dealing with drugs, but that's another matter. So that was not a way their abundance was very temporary and did not come from a true place. But when I was writing The Power of Now, that came as a result of course, my whole life was dedicated to first bringing the awakened state fully into my life, and then to teach it. I was already teaching for a number of years before I wrote anything, on a small scale, and so I would do workshops once a month. I was then living in the country in Somerset, England. I occasionally would travel to London once a month to a workshop or some other place, and I would do a weekly talk in a B&B where people would often come, and so I had a weekly talk, spiritual talk, every Sunday afternoon, and people would leave donations. Then I would occasionally see individuals for spiritual teaching, and that went on for some years. And I knew that my contribution was very important, but I realized it's growing very slowly, and I was reaching people, but not that many. And my income was just enough to keep me going. And that was fine. And then it came to me one day as I was sitting under an oak tree in a village in Somerset that perhaps I should ask for acceleration of my contribution to this world. And there was a village church nearby, and I went in. It was empty, like these wonderful little village churches in England. So I sat there alone, and I said, I want acceleration, please, of my function in this world and my teaching. I could feel already on an inner level, I could feel already an energy building up the moment I said it. It was very intense energy and but pleasant, an enormous build-up of. And then I said it a few more times, and then I went back home, and the following day at home I said it again a few times, and as I said it, usually in an affirmation you shouldn't say I want, but this time I did, and it worked. Because usually in affirmation you're stating something as if it were already the case. But in a way I said I want, and and the moment I said it, it was there on an inner level. There was an intensification. I was doing writing at the time. I would sometimes casually write down things that I was said during workshops that I didn't know before, but they just came out of my mouth, and things that came up during counseling sessions. But it was this very slow writing, just occasional. And a few days after having stated this acceleration process, something came to me, and I could see how things would develop. And I took out a piece of paper. This would normally be called, what I drew on this piece of paper would normally be called a vision board. A vision board is something that you present either in words or images, what it is that you envisage for yourself, and then you feel the reality of it already. But it wasn't, I didn't see it as a vision board, and I knew it was, I had this very strong feeling that it was going to happen. Without feeling that I need to make it happen, this is going to happen. So I wrote down a central point, spiritual teaching. There was a kind of central point of light or sun. I colored it in, and a book. And then it said many things like, the book is changing the lives of millions of people. The book that I write, it's translated into many languages. I travel all over the world, changing the consciousness. And suddenly I wrote all these things. Okay. And so suddenly I had this vision board that said, branching out from the central point, which was spiritual teaching. There was the book affecting millions of people, translated into countless languages, and abundant money coming to me. I also stated that as a result of that, changing human consciousness. All this was a single thing. I used some colors, and then I looked at it the next day, and it looked good, and then I put it away, and then I carried on with my life as normal, and weeks passed, a few months, 3 months or so passed, and nothing happened. I kind of forgot about it after that. And then one day I woke up, and with this incredibly strong feeling, I need to move away, and I didn't know why, but it was so strong. I need to move to the west coast of North America, So, and the next day it was there still. So it wasn't just one little thing. I wouldn't have acted on just a spontaneous thought, but it remained for day after day. So I don't want to go into too much detail, but I obeyed this. I left England and sold everything I had, and then traveled to the West Coast. And when I arrived on the West Coast, first in Vancouver, then in California. In California, I had one or two acquaintances there, but when I arrived there, I said, "What am I doing here?" But something drove me here. And somebody offered me a room in his apartment that was vacant, that I met through a friend I knew there, but I hardly knew anybody. And then I was sitting there, and one day, after a week or two, suddenly the impulse came very strongly to buy a notepad. And then I could feel the energy stream coming, which said, "What is enlightenment?" And I knew that was the beginning of the book, and I wrote it. And then the energy stream came every day, the writing came. By then I had forgotten that I had asked for acceleration, because it was several months back now. But I was now actually experiencing the acceleration. And I had forgotten about my affirmation because I only used it for 2 or 3 days. And so, why did I have to move to the West Coast? Well, I only realized that when my visa expired, I moved back to England, but I didn't have a home anymore. I stayed in a community. The writing flow stopped. The moment I went back to the West Coast, whether it was British Columbia or Vancouver or California, didn't matter, the writing flow came back. So then I realized for some reason I had to go into this energy field, which has a specific kind of energy, the West Coast of North America, for the writing to happen. And then the acceleration continued. The acceleration was first the writing, and then eventually it got published. I had by then completely forgotten that I had ever done this thing. Several years later, I was looking at some old boxes that somehow survived my many moves. After the Power of Now was already a huge success and had affected the lives of millions of people, and I was looking at some old, and I had pulled out this thing I had drawn quite a few years before, because the whole process took several. The writing itself was 3 years, and then came the publication. It was probably 6 years or so, 7 years before it had happened. And I looked at it in amazement, and suddenly remembered that I had drawn this. And I looked and said, everything has come to pass. How amazing. But these are things that you can do as enjoy just in the energy of it. And you can, if you do a vision board of what a vision comes to you of how you can affect the world, then it's not so much of something that you want to achieve, but of something that wants to happen through you. There's a difference here. So you don't really ask, what is it that I want to achieve in this world? What is it that wants to happen through me? What is it that the world is asking me to do, but not so much the external world, but the underlying consciousness. What is it that wants to be born through me into this world? And it doesn't have to be a book, it could be an activity that you do, it could be something simple, that you enjoy, but that has quality and that affects people, something, whatever it is. It could be so many things that and consciousness can manifest in so many different ways. So you become still and say, what is it? If you don't know yet, but not everybody needs necessarily to do affirmations or manifestation techniques. If you find this the one thing that becomes the avenue, the channel through which consciousness mainly operates, brings about the creativity in your life, you find that it may just grow spontaneously. An interesting question: if I had not uttered these words asking for acceleration, what would have happened? Who knows? Nobody knows. The most likely thing perhaps would be that I would still be in England, and there would have been perhaps a slow growth of the teaching, and probably I would by now have affected several thousand people, doing workshops and so on. Perhaps a gradual, slow growth. This is just one possibility. And that would have been fine too. But the acceleration brought it out into the whole world. When I was writing The Power of Now, and this is interesting, there was intense enjoyment in there was an intensity of creative flow, very intense creative flow. It was almost as if the book was already there, but it just wanted me to. Not that it was dictated in any way. I used my mind, or not I, but the consciousness, the greater consciousness, not obstructed by the ego, was able to use my mind as an instrument. And so it wasn't a dictation as such, all those inspired, yes. I knew I wasn't doing it, it was just happening through me. And there was no guarantee. Obviously, I remember buying a book when I was writing The Power of Now. I bought a book, how to self-publish your book, because I was writing thinking, well, maybe I can self-publish when it's finished. So I read the book. I had interesting ideas about it. And one of the things it said, I remember one sentence in it says, "And no, you're not going to be on Oprah." That was the author's advice to the writers, because the author thought most writers have unreasonable expectations of what is possible. I had no expectation of being on Oprah, but didn't even occur to me. And I said, "Oh, no, on Oprah." Well, I'd never thought of being on Oprah. That wasn't. But I had no specific ways that I envisaged in how the book would go out in the world. In fact, I didn't know how it would do, and it didn't. I remember saying, if the book is, if I only sell a few hundred copies, that's fine, and then I'll just do something else. I will sell tomatoes. I don't know why these words came to me. I don't know whether I would ever have sold tomatoes, probably not, but those the words that came to me. I would have been fine with anything, but the book had to come out. What the book did in the world after it came out didn't matter to me that much, but because I had forgotten about the paper that I had drawn, the so-called vision board. discouragement. Interesting when a few times people said, what are you writing? When I said I'm writing a book, I'm writing a book about the present moment, at the now. And more than once people said, oh, well, isn't that an old idea that's been done already? Ram Dass did it. I don't think you should. I think you should think of something different. And of course, it didn't particularly stir me. The energy was too strong to be in a state of doubt. But don't listen when you have a vision of what you want to do and you feel the power behind it and you do it. Be very careful not to listen to people who say that this is not possible or that it's not a good idea. If you already have a service or a product and now you want to an acceleration or an amplification of what you're going to do with this service or product or your activity, make sure that what you have there that you want to grow is of high quality. And there's no point in having affirmations about you being a famous singer that inspires millions of people, or a famous musician that inspires millions of people, if you can't be bothered to practice very much. It's just because well, I want to be a famous singer, and a famous musician, but I love how you practice 3 hours a week and you play. That's you're not really dedicated fully to the work. That's what sometimes people have delusions about what they are good at. Years ago, when we still had cable TV, we don't have it anymore. I don't watch TV, but there was this program called American Idol, and I'm sure everybody has seen it, and there are other versions of it in other countries. Britain has Got Talent and things like that. And I've always found the funniest were the early stages of choosing people who are then. So people come, hundreds of people line up, and they are given 3 minutes to perform in front of this panel. And it's quite amusing to see how many people are totally deluded about their talents. They are the most awful, sometimes the most awful singers, the most dreadful voice, and they think they're the greatest. And then, of course, very disappointed when they're told they don't qualify. Some people can be very deluded about their abilities, and not only that, they haven't actually given it they haven't put any energy into it. They just have this idea, it would be great to be a rock star. I think I can be a rock star. Why can't I be a rock star? Anything that you want to achieve, you have to be dedicated and enjoy what you're doing, and focused energy has to flow into it, whatever it may be. There's no point in doing an affirmation if you have a service or a product that is not developed enough. Then you might be able to do an affirmation about that. Yes, I enjoy my practice. I enjoy. And that's fine. In England, I lived for a few years in a house in London, and there was downstairs, I was in this second floor, and on the ground floor there was a musician, a classical pianist, and she was not well known, but people had already heard of her, and I could hear her piano every day. She practiced about 5 hours a day on the piano every day. And it was quite, normally I wouldn't like to continuously have, but it was in the background and it was classical piano, so it was fine. And many years later, I saw her name again in a newspaper, and she had become a world-famous pianist. But she did practice 5 hours a day, and she seemingly loved what she was doing. Because if you don't love what you're doing, do not practice 5 hours a day. Because then you make yourself ill and stressed. But if you love what you're doing, then you give it your fullest. If you don't love it, and just because you have an egoic desire of being a great pianist, first of all, you won't achieve it, very unlikely, because there's ego there, and you're never fully in the doing, because you're too much focused on where you want to get to. Remember, the affirmation of what you want to achieve is in the present tense, and it's here now, and you only use it for a short period of time. You don't spend the rest of your day thinking of where you want to get to. The rest of your day you spend giving your fullest attention to what it is you're doing. Your fullest attention. Now, whatever course of action you embark on, especially if you bring something new into this world, you will find obstacles arising. In most cases, not necessarily. It could happen that everything immediately opens up for you and grows into something big. But in most cases, whenever you bring something new into this world, you will find people who don't like it. They like they are distrustful or envious or don't appreciate anything new coming into this world. And so people may try to sabotage, or the very structures of the world may become an obstacle or hindrance to what you're doing. You may be criticized. People will put possibly all kinds of obstacles in your path. You might meet unhelpful people. You can, if you're a writer, then the normal thing is you will be rejected. Your manuscript will be, that is normal. There's a long string of famous books that were rejected by like 50 publishing companies, rejected their books, and then they self-published and then became a huge bestseller. That is possible. Now, how do you deal with rejection and obstacles? Now, in the New Age community, well, I don't like the word community because it's not really a community. New Age people sometimes say they try to do something new, and when they come up against the first obstacle or hindrance, say, oh, maybe I'm not supposed to do that, because if I were supposed to do it, then everything would open up for me, everything would be easy. So maybe the universe isn't really, doesn't want me to do that. So here wisdom is required, and you need to look very carefully so that at the first sign of an obstacle you don't immediately give up. So you persevere, and wisdom again is required. You need to look at the situation, because there may be situations where the universe is telling you this is not the right course of action. But it does not mean when the first obstacle arises, or the second obstacle, or the third, does not necessarily mean that the universe is telling you that you're not supposed to do that. It is true, however, that once you have decided on a course of action and you are committed to it, unless it's totally out of alignment with what the universe wants, the totality, universal intelligence, unless it's totally out of alignment, at some point, if it is in alignment at some point it will become empowered. And that is so that a power will flow into it at some point that wasn't there before, and then when that happens, that's it. And you may need the face in it before that happens, because the face is part of how the power is created. It activates it. But initially, you may encounter obstacles. The power may not immediately be there, or it may be, but in many cases it's not. So do not be immediately discouraged when obstacles arise. They are bound to arise. Now, a very important thing now, when you have an aim, you have a desire, a purpose, and you're aiming towards that, then obstacles arise. Whether or not your ego has come back in, you can find out very easily by looking at how you deal with obstacles which come in the form of people or antagonistic people or situations. How do you, an obstacle can be a situation too. Just you're going to an important meeting and you miss your plane, or it's cancelled. Or maybe the universe doesn't want me to go to the meeting. It's an obstacle that arises. Now, how do you deal with it? How do you It's a sign that ego has come in if the obstacle creates a negative reaction in you. Then you have an egoic desire and attachment, an egoic attachment to the outcome. If, however, the obstacle arises and you just look at it and in an alert way, and you see, what can I do now? How can I circumvent this obstacle, or how can I use this obstacle? Perhaps you can even use it in some way. You change your approach towards it, or whatever it may be. So you either walk around it, you don't fight. You don't fight against anything. And especially the case if the obstacle or the hindrance comes in the form of people, you don't attack them. I'm talking verbally or in whatever way. Obviously not physically. You don't attack them, because that ego is always a sign of ego. So if anybody who you perceive as being somebody who seemingly wanting to sabotage what it is that you want to do, how do you deal with that? If ego is not involved, if you are aligned with the unconditioned consciousness, the intelligence of the universe that then is operating through you, you don't have the negative reaction. You look at the situation and you see what is possible. You may have to change your approach. You may have to withdraw for a moment. Perhaps there's nothing you can do. Perhaps there's something you can do. But there's not the hostility. There's no hostility that arises towards the obstacle. If antagonism or hostility arise towards the obstacle, your ego is there. Either it was there from the beginning and you didn't know it, or it has come because the ego can come in at a later stage when you are engaged. It can still come in. And if the ego comes in, then whatever you do becomes contaminated with the ego, and you're setting yourself up for frustration, suffering, ultimately. If a competitive element is involved in what you're doing, let's say you have a product or a service, and if ego comes in, then you will perceive others as people you have to compete against, and almost if the ego is strongly there, then almost as your enemies, and anybody who offers a similar service or product, you talk badly about them and say, "Oh, that's all ego." You don't need, you offer the best service or product that you can, and you don't need to worry, be concerned. This would only be ego about what others offer that have similar services or products. You can even, there is no scarcity. You have to come from fullness, not scarcity. Again, it's the ego will always think in terms of not enough and scarcity, and you need to take away something from others, and so that, but that is not the empowered way. Coming from fullness means that you create out of this the fullness of being. This is an interesting word, and it's a way to describe the transcendent dimension. It seems to be the exact opposite of what the Buddha said when the Buddha talked about emptiness, which I translate as spaciousness. And yet, when you are in touch with this transcendent dimension, it is both fullness and emptiness. It is undifferentiated power. It is undifferentiated consciousness. One could say it's a bit like gold, pure gold, and then you can make many things out of gold. You can make many ornaments and jewelry and all kinds of interesting objects they're all made of gold. But there is gold in its undifferentiated state, and that's the fullness of life, which we could call emptiness because it's formless in that state. Formless consciousness, spacious consciousness. The question is, can you, as I'm talking about it right now, can you sense that in the background? I sense that all the time, that there's that pure gold, so to speak, that then becomes words, it becomes action, it becomes a thought, it becomes a whole new physical creation out there. It takes on form, the formation of form out of the formless. And then eventually all forms return to the formless. Yes, so don't get attached too much to the creation, the form, because the form is destined to dissolve again. It's not destined to last, but it's destined to have a certain function, to be enjoyed in this wonderful play of form to which you now contribute, and it's all part of the growing consciousness. The fullness, then, scarcity, the idea of scarcity comes from ego. There is, in the universe, there is no scarcity, there is infinite abundance. If you look to the wrong place for abundance, then yes, there is scarcity. If we think the only way we can have energy is by using fossil fuels or whatever, of course, first of all, they're not going to last, and it's not the right place to look for it. If you look to the sun as an example of infinite abundance, then you can see how abundant the universe is. The sun producing unbelievable amounts of energy every second. If you look at nature, how it produces seeds, millions and millions of seeds, all continuous proliferation of life forms, infinite abundance. So the universe is an abundant universe. There's not scarcity. It's only if you look to the wrong place for abundance, then there is scarcity. So make sure that you don't have ideas around money that are negative. The money is just it's a symbol for energy in this dimension. It is true, of course, that there are people who are very wealthy and have made zero contribution to the world that does exist. There are people who just gamble. I mean, a lot of what happens in the stock market is just gambling these days. We all know about that. They come up the weirdest schemes of, and there are people who become very rich, but there are many others who make actually a valuable contribution to the world. And when you contribute something valuable in whatever form, almost inevitably some money will come to you, and more than enough. And then make sure that you don't you recycle it also, so you don't. Some people get angry that there are some people who have so much money that how can one person be allowed to have so much money? Bill Gates has don't know how many billions, and but I mean, Bill Gates is. He has realized that he has so much that it becomes meaningless, and he's giving away 95% or so of his money. It makes or countless charities and so on. Whether any of those actually, they all alleviate suffering, which is a wonderful thing. Whether any of those bring about a change in human consciousness, I don't know. So there is the alleviation of suffering, which is a good thing. And you can tackle the suffering of this world on one level, the level of effect, or you can address it on the level of cause, or both at the same time. So if you help needy people, that's a wonderful thing. You are addressing human suffering on the level of effect, because human suffering is an effect of a dysfunction in the collective consciousness, unconsciousness. If you look at the suffering, ultimately the source of suffering, the main source of suffering is the dysfunction in the collective human mind. That's where the suffering, there's more suffering inflicted by humans on other humans than suffering inflicted by let's say a natural disaster or something like that. So look, my main point, I address mainly suffering on the level of cause, the causal level. But in addition, it's a wonderful thing to help needy people. Don't as long as you don't build an identity for yourself around helping, that you are the great, and you then condemn others for not doing it. One more thing for this. An important part of manifesting is the vibrational frequency of your entire being. So, and this is where the inner body awareness practice comes in. When you pay attention to the inner body and you feel the aliveness that pervades the inner body, you're actually raising the vibrational frequency of your entire being and of every cell in the body. And every negative thought lowers the vibrational frequency. So even if you never do any kind of manifestation, if you could live in a relatively high frequency, you would attract relatively pleasant experiences and situations. Not that you won't be challenged anymore. There's no such thing as a life that's not challenged. But there would be a predominance of you wouldn't come, not really come into contact too much with very unpleasant people. Challenging, yes, here and there people are challenging, but there is a correspondence between your life experience, the experience of your reality, and the vibrational frequency of your being, which includes the kinds of thoughts you think, predominantly, habitually. It includes the emotional state that predominates in you, and it includes the entire frequency of your body, which is raised when you become aware of the inner body. And that's how presence also, in order to be present, you need to be aware of the inner body. It becomes part of the sense of presence. So when you feel yourself going down, your mood comes over you. It's important to become aware of that, catch yourself so that you don't identify with it, and you say, oh, there's a mood. It's just come over me. It could be an anxiety, it could be expressed as a thought, a nihilistic thought, or everything is just pointless. What's the point? This world is just so dreadful, I can't be bothered to do anything anymore. People are awful. Everybody's out for themselves. Spiritual people especially are all hypocrites. And all kinds of statements about other people. And you can read, if you want to learn more about it, read stuff on the internet, what people say about others. And they are not empowered. It's the ego speaking in all the ways in which you want to tear down other people and criticize and destroy them, and people that you don't even know, you only know them as lines of script, and so you attack all those people. It's all egoic, an attempt of the ego to enhance itself. It's totally futile. So be very careful, because these are all obstacles on your life path of manifesting, as Oprah puts it, your best life, living the best life you can. And that's it's a good aim to have. These obstacles, observe the obstacles that arise in your mind. Criticism, making others wrong, and thereby making yourself right. Complaining. These are all obstacles. You can learn a manifestation technique, and you can sit down. You can sit down in your room twice a day, and you go, I'm wealthy and I'm achieving great things, or whatever. It could be more specific. My company is growing, or I'm becoming the CEO of I am the CEO of my company, and I'm expanding it greatly, and then for the rest of the day, you criticize others, and you complain about what's wrong, and everything is wrong, what people say and do, and where you are, and always out of alignment with the present moment. Like every moment is a denial of your manifestation. So in a little while we're going to look at dealing with health situation with your physical body, and what can be done through conscious manifestation, whether that's helpful or not. We'll look at that and a few other things.